Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be talking a little bit more about Andrew Yang and some of my broader, more philosophical views on him. I just got back from a rally for Andrew Yang in Council Bluffs, Iowa. It was just a little thing for like an office opening, and there was some like town hall type thing, rally type thing right afterward. And he gave two speeches, and yeah, it was a good time. I got to shake hands with him, take a picture with him. Got this hat autographed. I got this hat, which is nice. And yeah, it was a good time overall. And I had a lot of good conversations with other Yang supporters. Had a lot of disagreements because I am not the typical Democrat, and I'm not the typical Yang supporter either, because I am very skeptical of the hysteria around automation. And yeah, in general, in a lot of his speeches, there was a lot that I didn't like and a lot that I disagreed with. However, through some talking, I got some stuff clarified to me, and I think I have a much better view of what Yang is and why I support him. So in general, one thing that Yang talks about a lot is how he identified the problem that Trump identified and had the wrong solution for. That's something Yang talks about all the time, and I think it honestly makes a lot more sense now that I think about it in the context of what the actual problem is. When we look at America, we see this big problem. This is the problem related to corporations that both of these people talk about. These big corporations are getting a lot of power, a lot of economic power, and a lot of political power as well. This is the big problem. Not necessarily the economic power, because you can always choose to use a competitor or create your own business or anything like that. But more of the problem is how the federal government and these businesses are in bed together, and they do each other's bidding, and it screws over everyday Americans just because these businesses can basically rig the system through the government. And Andrew Yang points out this as, in a sense, he sees the problems with automation coming from this. And I think that's not necessarily the main root cause. I think there is, to some extent, there's some problem with automation that comes from this because of government regulations that prevent entrepreneurs from implementing their own new ideas, because government regulation stifles the mind and it prevents people from producing new things, from coming up with new things as efficiently, as effectively. People generally still can get around regulations in the end, but ultimately regulations hinder economic progress and hinder the ability of an economy to adapt. If you think of it in terms of short run versus long run, regulations make it a longer time for an economy to get to its long run equilibrium. It keeps it in a short run for a longer time because businesses can't adjust as quickly when there's regulations. So I think this problem of automation is one that will be solved in the long run. I think even Yang agrees with this. There will be new jobs created, and ultimately, in the absence of regulation, these low-skilled laborers will be able to find work. The issue is getting from the short run to the long run, because initially a bunch of people will get laid off. Now it'll be a gradual process, which I think people don't tend to think about very often. I think automation, it's very gradual. It's not like all of a sudden all the truck companies get self-driving trucks and then all these truck drivers are immediately unemployed. It's a process, and generally these people, they'll slowly be laid off and they can slowly be picked back up. The issue is, how are we going to get them to get picked back up? And a lot of that comes from the government being in bed with big businesses, because these big businesses, they push for regulations that keep out smaller competitors, keep out new innovations. And these new innovations are necessary to get these people jobs, to get these people into work. So I think that ultimately the solution to automation will be deregulation. And that's one thing that I like about Yang, because ultimately his solution is not more regulation on automation. He has the UBI, which I don't like it as a solution. But I think if we can't deregulate, we almost have to do something because the government is taking away so much from people through all this regulation. So it's almost in a form of recompensation in that sense, because the government fucked us all over by regulating the fuck out of the economy and preventing these low-skilled laborers from finding new jobs. So essentially, the UBI would be a repayment, a payment back for the issues that this regulation has caused, for the unemployment that the regulation caused. So yeah, that's essentially how I can somewhat justify it on pragmatic grounds. However, I still am very mixed on his solutions, and I think his identification of what the main source of the problem is, being automation, and the profit motive being the source of automation, I don't think that's necessarily the problem. I think the root problem goes beneath that. I think the root problem is government. The government being able to control the economy as much as it can. Because then these businesses, they have to get in bed with the government to prevent the government from regulating them out of existence. This is one thing with Microsoft. Until Microsoft was getting threatened with antitrust laws, they were not in Washington, but now they're in Washington because they got threatened. So these businesses have to use government power to stay alive, because otherwise the government's going to use the power against them. And the problem is that these businesses are using government power. It makes it impossible for new competitors, for new innovations to solve some of these problems, such as automation. I'd say that can be considered a problem, although it's a very, very positive thing, even in a mixed economy. I'd say automation is very positive. It has the effect of lowering prices, increasing production. All these sort of things are amazing things for everybody, for all the consumers. And ultimately, I see that as a big, big positive in the long run. And even in the short run, it's very positive for to a large extent. But yeah, generally, I think the problem is government. I think the problem that all these people are identifying, I think it's legit. I think these problems are legitimate. But the issue is the mixed economy, the government. That's why the corporations have the power that they do, that people hate so much. Which I think people have an unjust malice towards corporations in this sense, because these corporations are only defending themselves. There is very little reason to be angry at the corporations. The real problem here is the government. I don't like the anti-corporation rhetoric that comes with a lot of what Yang talks about. I think essentially the rhetoric may be wrong, but he has some of the same conclusion, or some of the same policy implementations as I would have. I would fight for no regulation, and I don't think Yang doesn't really believe in regulation, which I find to be a very good thing. At least he doesn't seem to believe in it, because that's not the sort of thing that he advocates. But yeah, so my only issue right now is just the anti-corporation rhetoric, and I'm hoping that that'll go away in the general if he wins the primary and is nominated as the Democratic candidate. Then hopefully the anti-corporation rhetoric will go away, because he kind of has to focus on this problem that he's seeing and focus on the corporations, because that's what the Democrats want to hear. He's running as a Democrat. It's important to remember that, and I guess realize that if Yang has to focus on what the problem is, he has to focus on this automation problem and the problem of corporations having power. He can't focus as much on how he's going to solve it, which is what I like to hear as a objectivist. I love to hear how he's going to solve it, because he's going to solve it with UBI, which will ultimately phase out welfare and somewhat compensate people for the lack of jobs or the lack of future jobs caused by regulation. And he also is for deregulation, especially like nuclear. He's for deregulating nuclear, and just he's not a really pro regulation guy. He's a businessman. He understands how negative regulations are, and he's not for them in the end. At least for my, I should probably ask him if I ever have another opportunity to see him. But that's something that I'll need to ask him more on, because I'm not 100% sure of his position on. But ultimately, I think he's still the best candidate, and I'm still going to support him and continue doing what I'm doing, because I think Yang is the answer to, or not the answer. He is the best we have. He is the only hope that we can really have as objectivists, or anyone who's freedom oriented, anyone who's an individualist. Yang is really our only hope for this election. And it's sad to say, because there's a lot of stuff I dislike with Yang, and I'm sure that there's a lot of stuff that you, if you are freedom oriented, you dislike as well. And he's really the best we have, though, because he's going to solve it. He's going to solve these problems of the mixed economy in similar ways to how I would. And he's going to solve automation in similar ways to how I would, even though the automation hysteria is a little hysterical. I think it's a lot of bullshit. All the fear of automation, it's just bullshit. All the fear of corporations is bullshit. The real fear should be the mixed economy. But he's going to solve it. He's going to solve what he views as the problems in similar ways to how I would solve what I view to be the problems, which are ultimately very similar problems, as I've explained this so much earlier. So I think that's all I have to say for this video. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope to see you guys in the next video. Peace.